Alright, it has finally happened. Nintendo, after months of speculation and waiting, has finally released the first look trailer for the Nintendo Switch 2. I know I'm a couple of days late on this, but I have a day job. I can't do this as quickly as I would like to. But I really do want to talk about it, and I want to watch it. I mean, I have watched it multiple times already, but I want to watch it with you. And then I want to talk about some of the takeaways, the big takeaways that I have from this first trailer, because there's a lot that you probably already saw discussed. There's a lot that you can kind of, understand right away. And there's a lot of things that already came from the leaks. So, there's a lot of stuff that you already kind of know, but I do want to talk about some things that I find interesting in this video. So yeah, we're going to start by watching it, and I'll commentate on it a little bit as we do, but afterwards I have some more things to say, so let's get right into it. Okay, so here we have the trailer. Let's go and hit play. Also very interesting, they have the proper title on it now. It's Switch 2, but when they first published it, it just said an update from Nintendo, so they're trying to be really mysterious about that. Okay, we have a Switch 1 here. I mean, Joy-Con came out. Now it's bigger, pretty much what you expected. Now you see it shedding off its skin here, and it looks like it has more of a sort of metallic finish, especially when you see it up close here. There's a bit of a sheen to parts of it, and I wonder if they are going to use metal. There's a USB-C port on the top now. That's new. There's the new redesigned kickstand that looks very similar to the one on the Switch OLED in terms of the functionality that it has. It can go very low. It's pretty good. Now we have the Joy-Con here. They also got bigger. There's an extra button there if you look closely. There's the colors there popping up. I really like this video, by the way. Like, it is just like a hardware overview sort of thing, but the animation is so slick in this. It's very well done. It kind of almost doesn't feel very Nintendo-y in the way that it's executed. So it's very interesting and looks very cool. You see them gliding along the floor now, and you saw them there pop off. There's a little something that stayed on the surface where they were gliding, so that was interesting. The new magnetic attach system, you see it come out, and it just pops back in. And there's it too. It's a Nintendo Switch 2. Well, there you go. Now we have a fancier look here with some more color. And boom, Mario Kart. Just like that, they've confirmed that Mario Kart is in development. At first glance, it does look a little bit similar to Mario Kart 8, but it is very different, and I want to talk about that a little bit later. We see the Joy-Con grip, which also does look a bit different because now the Joy-Con come in from the side, so it can't really go around the Joy-Con in the same way that the current one does. There's obviously backwards compatibility. Like Nintendo, I don't know why they confirmed this. It is nice to see. And the Nintendo Direct on April 2nd, that's going to focus exclusively on Switch 2. And of course, here we have the Switch 2 experience, which means they're gonna bring the Switch 2 to places around the world. All right, so we had a good look at that. And yeah, the trailer, I actually think it's pretty nice. So if you followed all of the leaks and everything, there's not a lot that's new here. And I think a lot of people were disappointed because of that, because they saw pretty much everything that this was on the surface already because of all those leaks. So this video in that sense didn't really provide a lot of new information, but I just think it was very well done. Like, the animations are all super sleek. I really liked just watching all the buttons appear and the ports and everything. I feel like Nintendo doesn't usually do like that good of a job with something like that. Like, the visual presentation of a trailer isn't like the biggest focus, but they did it really well here. I really liked watching that video. So yeah, I think it was a, it didn't have everything that we wanted to know, but it was interesting. And I think importantly, there are a few takeaways that we can take away from this video already. So I wanted to talk about those things a little bit. So we have 7 key points here that I kind of want to talk about. And let's start with the first one, which is identity. And I think that's really the main point of this first trailer, was to showcase the identity of this new hardware. The fact that it's focused exclusively on the hardware And Nintendo very clearly wanted to make this so that you see like this is not the Switch. This is a new thing, and you can you see all the differences. It's bigger now. The Joy-Con are black now. They have highlights. They have this rail that pops off and has bigger buttons. You see the mouse mode sort of like gliding around. You see the Joy-Con strap. Everything about this hardware is different, and they're focusing on every little part of it and showcasing all the differences. So everyone who sees this can understand like, so this is all different from what we already have. Like there's some new ports, there's a new finish, there's a bigger screen, bigger controllers. They're all black now. They have bigger buttons. They focus on all of these things so that you have a very clear understanding that this is not a Switch. It's a Switch 2. And obviously the name itself is doing that same thing. Like this is the next big step for the Switch brand. And that is obviously very important for Nintendo, because whenever they've transitioned from a very successful platform to a new one, they had a little bit of trouble getting that point across. Like the Nintendo 3DS, they did try somewhat, but I think the name was so similar to the DS that it was a little complicated for people to understand. And then more so with the Wii U, like they did a terrible job with that. Like the logo was very similar and just had this weird U shape that didn't really convey much. Like I feel like a lot of people would even overlook that. It almost feels like a copyright logo. It didn't feel very distinct. And because they also just focused so much on the controller and never like the console hardware, they never show these things together enough, during the lead up to the release. They never made it super clear what it was, and people just didn't really understand what it was as a result. So with the entire focus of this video is very clearly to show like, this is not the same thing you already have, this is new. Then this name very clearly shows you that, okay, this is new. Also, I guess I just want to mention the logo there, because a lot of people seem to have problems with the fact that it's just the current Switch logo, like this one with the 2 next to it. I think that is perfectly reasonable. I think it looks good. Some people want to like the 2 in the middle of the Joy-Con here, like have the 2 in the middle of this, and it's like, why would you do that? I don't think that looks good at all. And Nintendo really wants this image to be the recognizable brand here. Like whenever you see this set of Joy-Con, you know that it's a Switch, and creating a divide in the middle of that logo would really break that brand identity. I feel like that's something, I mean, I'm not no marketing expert, but when you take something that's really recognizable and popular and you warp it in a way that it changes the fundamental basic shape that people recognize, then it's not as recognizable. Like even if it's the same elements, if you just split them apart and put something in the middle, it's not the same kind of identity that people are used to. So they really want this to be part of the Switch family, but they also wanted it to be very clear that it's the next step. So it's very recognizable, but it's also very easy to tell that it's a new thing. And I think that's for the better. Like I always supported the Switch 2 name. I think it makes a lot of sense for something that is as iterative as this hardware is. And I think that's great, and I hope it works out when it actually hits the market and people have to think about buying it. I hope that makes things very clear. Point number 2 is mouse mode. So this was rumored shortly before the trailer came out. It was very heavily talked about in leaks, and it turns out that it's probably true. So Nintendo really didn't have any voiceover or text really confirming any features, but we did see the Joy-Con like gliding along the surface, very clearly looking like they would work as a mouse. And they even have a Joy-Con strap that you see that is very clearly designed for the Joy-Con to be able to glide around more easily and without wearing out. And also it just kind of provides like a slightly wider base, because the Joy-Con rim is thinner than the Joy-Con itself, so that it can insert into the console. So having that strap gives it like the same width, so you have a little bit more balance when moving the Joy-Con around. So it's just better overall. And this is like a huge thing. I feel like It's so weird to see Nintendo do it because Nintendo is like the most console focused of all the console manufacturers in a way. Like they've never really talked a lot about mouse support or keyboard support. Like that's something that Xbox did a lot, like mouse and keyboard support a few years ago. Like that was all the rage, right? And it's seen as a more sort of hardcore thing. So to see Nintendo embrace that more hardcore side is really weird in a way, really unexpected, I guess I would say. But it's not bad at all. I feel like having more control methods is definitely for the better. And there are games that really benefit from it. You know, obviously shooters are some, like shooter games are something that people would obviously think of right away. I think they actually work mostly fine with like gyro and analog stick controls. But I think things that do really benefit from this mouse mode and that precision of moving a mouse around, Super Mario Maker, the level creator in those games, like on the Wii U, it was nice because you had a gamepad and you had a stylus, so you had that precision. The Switch doesn't really have that though, because you only have one screen. You can only do it in handheld mode. But using your finger, you know, your finger is so much bigger than the tip of a stylus, so the precision just isn't there as much. So yeah, using a mouse makes total sense. And you know, the Switch does have mouse support, some games do support it. But because, you know, it's hardware that you have to get on your own, it's never really talked about by Nintendo. Games just don't bother supporting it because how many people are actually going to do that on the Switch? Now, when you have this hardware built into the controllers that everyone gets with the Switch 2, every developer is going to want to take advantage of that and build that feature in. And so then, like, even if you think that the Joy-Con are an uncomfortable way to use a mouse, the fact that they have that feature built in means that every developer can now develop and target that possibility. And if you do have a USB mouse that you think is more comfortable, then you can probably just plug it in and use that instead. So, you know, you're gonna get support for mouse and keyboard, or at least the mouse, in a lot more games, and I think that's a pretty big deal. And just all things considered, that's gonna benefit everyone. I do wonder how it's gonna affect like multiplayer matches, because a lot of games online these days already have this separation between PC players and PlayStation or Xbox players, because, you know, using a mouse and keyboard is way more precise and easier to do than using a controller for things like shooters, where you have a lot more precision and you can play much better. And also at the same time, you know, on console now they have like things like auto lock or auto aim or aim assist or something, where they help you aim at the thing you want. So it kind of makes things even easier than playing on a computer. So, you know, there's this divide now. And with the Switch supporting a sort of mouse mode, I wonder, like, are they gonna have some Switch players go into PC servers, or are they all gonna be grouped together? Like, how does that work in terms of making sure that everyone is on a level playing field? I think that's a big question. But it will be interesting to see how Nintendo addresses that. Point number 3 is the mystery button. So if you noticed, when Nintendo showed off the Joy-Con here, there is a mystery button below the home button on the right Joy-Con. It's just a square here, but if you follow the leaks, you know that in some of the pictures that were shared, that button had a C on it. So it's interesting that Nintendo is trying to like obfuscate what it does. Either that design is changing, like maybe it's not a C anymore, it's just like a pre-production or something, and they're going to put something new on it and they don't have it ready yet, they didn't want to share that yet. Or they just are going out of their way to hide that C for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want people talking about the C, because there's already been a lot of theories and talk about what that C means. So there's been this rumor or report that it stands for campus, and that this would be some kind of feature in the Switch 2 that has a lot of social elements. It would support things like group chats and voice chats, and apparently even streaming your games to other people. I'm not entirely sure like what that would entail, how exactly that would do it, how that would work. I don't think anyone knows right now, because, you know, it's just a leak and it's very hard to be concrete about it. But it is interesting that the button there is just blank, like there's nothing on it. I'm sure there's going to be something on that button by the time we get like more information about the Switch 2, but it is interesting to see it nonetheless. That Nintendo is so clearly trying to like obfuscate what it does, so it's kind of interesting. But that's all I had on that point. And point number 4, obviously we have to talk about that Mario Kart trailer. It is really nice to see a game here. I was worried that it was gonna be just the hardware, and seeing a new Mario Kart for the first time in like 11 years. Like Mario Kart 8 came out in 2014. They just did a deluxe version for the Switch, so it's still basically the same game. It does have a lot of improvements, but same engine and everything. And now we finally have a new one, and it actually looks pretty exciting for a couple of reasons. You know, it's a very short clip, and visually at first you might think it looks very similar to Mario Kart 8, but I think the first thing that struck me right away was like, it feels like the scale of the track that they show here in this video is so much larger than any Mario Kart track I've seen before. Like it's just really wide. Like the camera pans out, the road is really wide. It seems really long. It just kind of fades into the distance. You don't even see where it ends or turns or anything. Like it's a really large feeling environment. And I think that kind of scale is something that you could not have done with that degree of quality on the Switch, because the graphics do look even better, I would say. Like maybe not hugely better, but they do look better. And I've seen some deep dives already showing like the polygon count is higher, like the carts look smoother, more round. And the characters themselves have a more chubby aspect, and they're also very like animated. There's this little section where you see Mario bounce on the road, and everything's like has a bit of a stretchy effect to it. So they're clearly like playing around with what you can do with additional graphics power, and it's looking pretty good. The bigger scale is also a big thing, obviously. And then if you notice right at the beginning of the trailer, there's the starting grid. There is the lines for each of the racers. There are 24 lines now. So every Mario Kart game on consoles since the Wii game, I guess, has supported 12 players. Now that's doubling apparently. So that is a lot of characters on the same racetrack, and that's probably why it's also so much bigger. And that's also going to take a very big toll on the processing power. So that's why on the graphics side, initially it may look a little similar, but there's a lot more going on that power is being used for. And if you want something that's just like eye candy, Mario Kart may not be like the best game for that, because the art style and the way it's made, it's not really meant to be the most graphically intense game, but it does use that power in ways that will make the game, I think, more frantic and fun. And that can only be a good thing with Mario Kart. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. And you know, the starting grid, seeing the 24 lines, it is also confirmed that at the very least there's more than 12 racers, because at multiple points in the trailer you see more than 12 characters driving in a kart. So I would say it's almost guaranteed 24 players are going to be supported. So that's pretty exciting. Some people have brought up the possibility of it being like an open world type game of some kind. I would love for Mario Kart to have a more single player exploration or something, some kind of focus on single player, because it's always been a multiplayer game and it's a super fun game. And I do also just really enjoy going through all the cups and getting 3-star ranks in all of them. That's pretty cool. But I would like to have something that feels like it's catered to single player and to make it fun if you're playing alone. I feel like they haven't really done that in a really long time. Mario Kart DS had the mission mode, and I always wish that they would bring something like that back. We'll have to see, because this really was a very short look at this game, and that's really all about all we know about it so far. So we'll have to wait a little longer. On that note, the next point is the Nintendo Direct. So I think people are a little bit disappointed that this Nintendo Direct is only coming in April 2nd. It's still pretty far away, but it's 2 months and a half, and I don't think it's nearly as bad as some people are making it out to be. So the way I see it, like the deadline we had to hear anything about the Switch 2 was March 31st, and we had no idea when it was actually happening. So now we got this trailer, we got something to hold on to, we have a specific date to look forward to, and that date is only 2 days after the deadline we had before. So I think that actually makes the wait a lot easier. It's an extra 2 days from the deadline we had, and we know exactly what date it's going to be now. So I don't know. To me, that makes the wait a whole lot easier. Like, what made me so nervous about this reveal in the past few weeks and months is like, it felt like it could have happened at any time. So I just kept refreshing pages and hoping that it would be there at some point. Now we know when it's coming, so I'm way more relaxed about it. I have plenty of things to play on the Switch anyway. Like, I'm not in a rush to get the Switch 2. It's nice just to know when we're gonna know more, and I'm really looking forward to that. I do think it's almost a bit of a shame, they're calling it a Switch 2 Direct, and when they did the Switch reveal, the big blowout of information, they had the Switch presentation in 2017, and that was a live show. And I think that really drove home how special and how important this was for Nintendo, because, the Nintendo Direct format was not new at that time. Nintendo has been doing Directs worldwide since at least 2013. I believe they did the first one in Japan in 2011. But I think actually, 2011, they may have started them worldwide just a little bit later than in Japan. So, by 2017, the Direct format was Nintendo's primary way of delivering information, even at E3 and stuff like that. But they had this live show that had risks, the translation, the real-time translation, there were some problems with that. But it really showed how important this was to Nintendo, how much they cared to make this a big deal to people. Like, the vibe that was in that room leading up to the actual presentation starting, it was so exciting. I remember watching that live, and it was so special. And I feel like doing a Direct might take a little bit away from that, but it's obviously a much safer and much cleaner approach. Like, with the Direct, you can really clean up the presentation, remove awkwardness, make sure everything flows the way that you want it to. It's a lot easier to produce and make entertaining. So I get that, and I think it's still going to be a very enjoyable show. But part of me does wish we got a little bit of that. Even the awkwardness of a live show is kind of interesting, because it's kind of fun to be in person witnessing something. It's different. It's a different vibe, and I kind of, for this special occasion, I think that would have been cool to see. Maybe it will be. Maybe they're using the Direct branding, but it's still a sort of actually a live presentation. That would be interesting. We'll have to see, but yeah, that's my thoughts on that. I do hope, or I wish, that it would be a bigger live presentation. I think that would be really cool. Point number 6 is backwards compatibility. This is a thing that Nintendo already confirmed a few months ago in November, and they mentioned it again here with a little bit more detail in this trailer. So the Nintendo Switch 2 will play Switch 1 games as well as Switch 2 games. And it works with Switch 1 games that are both physical and digital. So that is a very important confirmation that some people were afraid wouldn't be the case, that there was some worry that Nintendo would only support physical or only support digital, and you'd have a problem, with bringing your library over, depending on how you went during this generation. But no, everything's going to be supported. I imagine the eShop is going to be like the same sort of back end in a way, so you can just get all your games again. And then if you have a physical game, you just insert the cartridge, which looks to be exactly the same size as the Switch 2 cartridge. Well, they haven't shown the Switch 2 cartridge yet, but we did see the cartridge slot, and I think it's probably going to be about the same size. I don't know if they're going to make them different somehow, but yeah, it's looking very similar, and you can just use either one, either digital or physical. But one thing that was interesting in this screen is that, some games may not be supported or fully compatible with the Switch 2. And I think Nintendo was very careful to use these two terms separately, not be supported or not be fully compatible. Because there are some things that may not work at all. And I think there are some things that will work under certain circumstances. So I think the things that won't be supported are very limited. I think the big one here is going to be Labo, and I don't think that's a big deal at all. So Labo was the set of cardboard accessories that you would build, and they came out in early 2019, I believe. They were completely designed around the model of the Switch that was out at that time, the original one. So they already don't work with the entire Switch family. Like the Switch Lite cannot use Labo at all, and the Switch OLED, it's a little wider. I think some of the things might kind of work, but others probably don't because of just a slightly bigger size. So yeah, with the Switch 2 being so much bigger, as we saw in the trailer, that's obviously not going to work with Labo. And yeah, there's just no way around that. Like, it's not going to work. And I think that's fine. I think Labo was always meant to be a sort of a one-off experience. It's not something that you would necessarily want to carry forward. I don't even think anyone who bought Labo is still using it today, so who really cares? But then there's the fully compatible part, and here it's a little bit more complicated. So I think one of the big things here is that because of the different attachment mechanism of the Joy-Con, some of the accessories that exist right now for the current Switch are not going to work with the Switch 2 with the Switch 2 Joy-Con. So the thing is, like Ring Fit is the biggest example. So that just has a rail that you slide the current Joy-Con in, and you use that as the controller for Ring Fit Adventure. With the Joy-Con on the Switch 2, obviously you can't do that because there's no rail to slide in, they're bigger, it's just not going to work. But I'm pretty confident that the Switch 2 will work with Switch 1 Joy-Con wirelessly. Much like the Switch Lite, it doesn't have Joy-Con, but you can connect them wireless if you want to. So I think that's what they're going to do with the Switch 2. You can use a Switch 1 Joy-Con. So they say it's not fully compatible because if you buy a Switch 2 expecting to play Ring Fit Adventure on it, you have to know that you'll also need the Switch 1 Joy-Con. But the game still works. It just doesn't work out of the box in the way that some people might have expected. So they have to give you that warning. And I think something similar is going to apply to pretty much every game that uses the IR camera on the underside of the Switch 1 Joy-Con. So here you have this little infrared camera here. I don't think this is on the Switch 2 Joy-Con. If you look at the close-up that Nintendo showed in the trailer, and actually on the website they have another, I think a slightly different perspective. Both Joy-Con look the same on the underside, and it doesn't look like either of them as the IR camera. So I think any game that uses the IR camera is not going to work with the Switch 2 Joy-Con. You're gonna be able to play it though, because you can use the Joy-Con from the current Switch if you have them already. So I think that's what fully compatible means. So if you have like 1-2 Switch for some reason, like there's that hamburger eating minigame or whatever it is where you have to chew in front of the camera, I think that's like you're not gonna be able to do that with the Switch 2 controllers. But if you do have the Switch 1 controllers, then you can use that to play that game on the Switch 2 and it'll be fine. So yeah, I think that's what fully compatible means here. The game works, the software itself works just fine, but you will need extra accessories that are not included or designed for the Switch 2. So yeah, I think that's what Nintendo is getting at. I don't think you have to worry about any game that you really care about not working, like if you have Zelda, Mario Odyssey, anything like that. Those games are going to work just fine. I think there's no concern about that whatsoever. It's just the specific hardware features of the current Switch that might be more of a challenge. And, that's fine. The IR camera was barely used. I think it's totally fine to move away from it and focus on something that might be more interesting, like that optical sensor for the mouse. So I think that's totally reasonable. I don't think there's anything to worry about there. Yeah, I'm sure that's gonna be fine. I am wondering if we're gonna get more details on things like improved performance when playing Switch 1 games. I think That's something we'll probably only hear about in April. But we'll have to wait and see now. The final point that I want to touch on with this is Nintendo's creativity gone? So here's a reaction that seems to be very common these days since not just the announcement of the Switch 2, but even before when we started seeing the leaks, and it was pretty much just a bigger Switch. Is it, oh, Nintendo is not doing anything crazy anymore, they're just playing it safe and boring and whatever it is. Like, I don't agree or understand that reaction all that much. So it is true that ever since the DS, Nintendo has had this sort of idea that with each new console generation there has to be something new that is very unique, very different, and really changes how you perceive the games on that platform. So, you know, the DS obviously had two screens, the Wii really popularized motion controls, and then the 3DS, you know, it still had the two screens, but it also had the 3D screen. It was really different at that time, you know, especially having 3D without the need for glasses. That was very interesting, actually. And then, you know, the Wii U had the screen on the controller in addition to the TV, and they can like communicate with each other. There's always something weird, quote unquote, with each piece of Nintendo hardware. And I think in a way, you know, this is almost the most innovative, or I don't know if innovative is the right term, but it's the biggest change that Nintendo is doing with the Switch 2. It's the most significant departure in Nintendo's strategy, because they always did this. So being weird and wacky is almost what you'd expect. So in a sense, it's almost like this isn't boring because it's not what you'd expect from Nintendo. But I get it. Like, it is just an iterative upgrade, which is something that Nintendo hasn't really done since consoles like the Game Boy Advance. So it can feel, I can understand how you might feel like, oh, this is boring, it's not what Nintendo used to do. But you have to understand that, like, when you do that, when you have something new, very wacky each and every time, what you're doing is basically resetting your fan base each and every time. Because someone who likes one of your ideas is not necessarily going to like all of your ideas. Like, everyone really liked motion controls. It was really easy to understand and use, but no one really cared about the second screen on the Wii U. Like, it had advanced motion controls still, it had some cool uses, but it didn't do well because it didn't really resonate with people and people didn't understand it. So it's always a big risk doing something new. And I know a lot of people probably are thinking like, yeah, the risks are good, it keeps things fun, but it doesn't always keep companies afloat. And so I think taking the safe route here makes a lot of sense. And I disagree that Nintendo's creativity is gone. I think it's just focused on things that matter more than just the hardware you have, the base hardware. Because the Switch, one in itself, you know, you look at it now, it's like, it's a pretty boring concept. It's a console with controllers that you remove. Like, it doesn't feel new anymore, right? But Nintendo took that and they knew how to utilize the hardware they had to create unique experiences around that ecosystem that's fairly basic. So, you know, you had Labo, which was a really cool experiment. Like, as much as you might not be using it to this day, it was super cool at the time. You have this thing made of cardboard that you can assemble and put together, and you use that to play dedicated video games. And it's all built around this ecosystem of the Switch. You had Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, like you had this toy that is a real-life toy, but it ties into a video game experience that transforms your environment into something else. That's also super cool. Like, they can do things with this hardware that create unique experiences based on that same sort of boring ecosystem. So I think that creativity is still going to be there. We're still going to see some wacky things from Nintendo during this generation, but the base hardware in itself should be as, I guess, neutral as possible. It should be as approachable to every developer and every person as possible, so all the experiences that you'd expect can be played on it. So that's I think a very important focus for Nintendo. I think it makes a lot of sense to have that approach where like everyone can bring their experiences over. You can play all the games that you know and love, but we will still produce some things that are a little more out there. We will find crazy ways to make those things happen. I don't think the Nintendo's creativity is going anywhere. And also, like, Nintendo's creativity during the Switch era has been on games. Like, there's been a lot of creative ideas in Nintendo's games during this generation. Like, the obviously Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. Like, those are groundbreaking games within those franchises. They were so expansive and big and varied. Like, there was so much to those games that Nintendo had never really done in that scale. And I think they're going to keep doing that. And I think that's where the focus should be. It's not about the hardware. A gaming console isn't really much more than the games you can play on it. And so I think what matters is that Nintendo keeps bringing those interesting and creative experiences as software for the Switch too. Because the hardware itself doesn't have to be anything crazy, as long as it can play those games and deliver those fun and creative experiences to people. So I don't think Nintendo's creativity has gone anywhere. I think they've refocused it on the things that matter the most to consumers and obviously for the bottom line, so that they can sell the hardware to as many people as possible, and they have experiences that cater to as many people as possible. There's going to be games for more hardcore traditional gamers, and there's going to be wackier experiences for the more traditional, typical Nintendo fans. And I think there's nothing to be worried about in terms of Nintendo's creativity being gone or they're not having a fun mindset anymore. I think Nintendo still very much understands how to create fun experiences. That hasn't changed at all. Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what games actually come out of it when we get that Nintendo Direct in April. But yeah, those are my biggest points, my biggest takeaways from the Switch 2 reveal. Yeah, I'm very, very excited for that Switch 2 presentation in April. From what people were saying, there's going to be a Switch 1 Direct in February, as per usual. So I'm pretty excited for that too. You know, you have to remember that like every Switch 1 Direct is now also a Switch 2 Direct because the Switch 2 is backwards compatible. So yeah, any game that I get to learn about is going to be very exciting. So I'm looking forward to the next few months. I think the wait will be just fine. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Before you leave, I'd like to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel, because that would really help me out. Like, I really would like to build a bigger audience here. And yeah, any help you could give would be great. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.